I wrote this book because of the attack on law enforcement officers and the negative effect it's having in our society. And I feel that every police officer has a responsibility to speak out on the issue. So this is my way of speaking out on this particular issue.
I do not know you, but I am your brother.
You do not know me, but I am your protector.
I will run into a burning building to save your life.
Though I do not know your name, I will take a bullet for you.
Though we've never met,
I believe in duty and sacrifice
of self.
Your family is my family.
Is my family. Your life is my duty.
What's going on, guys? Time for another episode of Behind the Uniforms. The whole idea behind the series is to showcase the men and women behind the uniforms and show that they are just like us, fathers and mothers and husbands and daughters and sons. And it's not about the uniform, it's about a life of service and these guys wanting to go home to their families. I'm really excited today. We've got a guy who, I'm going to issue a trigger warning here because we're going to touch on a topic. I'm joking about the trigger warning for anybody watching, but we're going to be talking about a topic that is in and of itself sort of controversial. So why don't we just dive into it? Elliot, tell them all who you are.
Well, my name's Elliot Spector, and I was a police officer in Hartford, Connecticut from 1971 to 1980. Went to law school. After becoming an attorney, started to train police officers and represent police officers. And I wrote this book because of the attack on law enforcement officers and the negative effect it's having in our society. And I feel that every police officer has a responsibility to speak out on the issue. So this is my way of speaking out on this particular issue.
Beyond Black Lives Matter, Building Trust Through Knowledge and Understanding. Talk to me a little bit about the book.
Well, the book starts off talking about the negative effects that the Black Lives Matter movement has had on our society. Because police officers are being attacked, their credibility is being challenged, they're being called racist, use excessive force, shooting people unnecessary. Because of that, people have lost trust in law enforcement. And if they lose trust in law enforcement, they're not going to cooperate with law enforcement officers. And everybody knows that the community is the eyes and ears of law enforcement. And you can't effectively enforce crimes without having community support. So the reality of the situation in that respect, there are probably more people that are being harmed because we don't have cooperation with police officers in solving crimes and deterring crimes.
You know, Elliot, I'm a big believer that for there to be a goal that's accomplished in any protest and any outreach, anything like that, there has to be a clear and concise message. And I want to use the NFL backlash that we're seeing over the last few months as an example. There has the message of Black Lives Matter, which was sort of at the core of this, and police brutality has been completely lost because there was such blatant disrespect towards the American flag as a whole, and many veterans took offense to that. And so then the message of the whole cause behind this sort of gets lost because is it about veterans? Is it about America? Is it about police? Is it about police brutality? So with that being said, I want you to sort of dive in and give your 2 cents and the direction of, more on why you wrote the book and your message.
Okay. Well, the why I wrote the book is to continue on the negative effect that it has on society. Is we've also seen some depolicing, that is, police officers not out there because they're afraid to aggressively enforce the laws. I'm not going to stop cars, prevent motor vehicle offenses because I'm afraid I'm going to be, accused of racial profiling.
Sure.
We have police officers that may otherwise have reasonable suspicion to believe a crime is afoot and may be reluctant to approach that individual because I'm going to be accused not only of racial profiling, but I might get into an altercation and might get hurt. We've seen a huge increase in liability because of this. We've seen a change in judicial opinions because of this, because judges are humans. Jurors are humans. They're going to be negatively affected. And when we have greater liability and more negative judicial opinions, it hurts society because the taxpayers and the innocent people in our society are the ones that suffer the harm. And probably worst of all, we've seen attacks on police officers, physical attacks and killings of police officers that in some ways may have been motivated by this illusion that there is pervasive racism and excessive force in law enforcement. So what this book does is it tells the truth about it. And what I tried to do is I used anti-police bias publications like the Washington Post, for example. I even used the ACLU. I do not use any pro-police publications because I wanted this to be credible to everybody that reads it.
Awesome.
I also use government statistics, which I hope we can trust them. You know, they're not absolutely accurate, but they're fairly accurate. And so there are a number of conclusions, and I can run through a few of those conclusions
Please.
that might help you understand what I'm talking about. The Black Lives Matter starts off with a narrative that police officers don't care about Black lives. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, if anybody watched the videos of the Dallas shooting where 5 police officers were killed and 9 were wounded, people were seeing police officers protecting people who don't like them, who were criticizing them.
Yep.
They were protecting Black Lives Matter demonstrators. And when the shooting started, what did the police officers do? They didn't run for cover. We saw in the videos police officers protecting the citizens, sheltering them behind buildings, sheltering them behind cars. There was one woman who was interviewed on the news, Shatima Taylor, who was a Black Lives Matter supporter, who said, when the shooting started, a police officer put me on the ground. He protected me with his body. I looked up, there was another police officer protecting me. And she now has a new perspective on law enforcement, a true perspective. And her 12-year-old son, she said, wants to become a police officer, which is a great turnaround. The reality of the situation is police officers save thousands of lives every single year. When a police officer conducts a motor vehicle stop, maybe for distracted driving, maybe that person won't do it again, and there won't be an accident that'll occur. When police officers arrest felons and take them off the street, they're not hurting people in our society. When police officers conduct stops and frisks, they are doing that in accordance with Terry versus Ohio, the purpose being to deter crime.
Yep.
There are hundreds of ways that police officers respond to missing persons, medical calls, people in distress, violent situations. They are literally saving thousands of lives every year, regardless of race or ethnicity. And we want our police officers to go out there and aggressively enforce the laws. Now, the other mantra is that police are shooting innocent Black males. I read all of the Washington Post summaries in 2015 when they started to do this analysis. They don't do the same factual analysis, now, but they did in 2015. And some of these stats, and these are their conclusions, not my conclusions, but their conclusions, that of the 990 people who were killed, and subsequently one more was because they died after the fact, 730 of those people were committing violent crimes. That's 73.7%. And we're talking about serious violent crimes. We're talking about shootings, stabbings, hostage situations, aggravated assaults. 783, that's 73%, were armed with deadly weapons. That's the reality of the situation.
Yep.
Even when we talk about unarmed people, if you read the histories of these cases, these are dangerous, unarmed people who are causing acts that would lead any reasonable person to believe that their lives or the lives of somebody else were at risk.
But unarmed, in societal standards, means you're not holding a gun or a knife, correct?
That's correct.
So we look at the 15-year-old who was behind the wheel of a stolen vehicle down in, I believe it was Bridgeport in Connecticut a few weeks ago, that tried to run over a police officer, and the media reports all said he was unarmed. I don't know. I would say he was armed with a 3,500-pound piece of metal. And so on paper, he may have been unarmed. And I think a lot of the media reports are an accounting for the situation surrounding it. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I address that issue in the book, and I cite 4 United States Supreme Court cases where police officers used deadly force to stop people who were driving dangerously. And that's what that young man was doing. I don't know why he was doing it, but, who knows why these young people do what they do.
Right.
But that they do is they attack police officers after the shooting occurs.
Right.
And, what they say is, what can we tell our young Black males like this? First of all, the male in Bridgeport was not Black, but if he had happened to be Black, the Black Lives Matter would have become more involved in that thing. And they would have said they shot a 15-year-old Black male, who stole a car, who ran from the police, who drove recklessly. Who knows why this happens?
Right.
But the most recent incident that we had, which is not in the book because it's too recent, is the Smith case out of St. Louis, where there were riots and protests. Why did the police officers shoot this young man? Where the question really should be is, when did this 24-year-old Black male decide to become a criminal? When did he decide to sell drugs? Because he was convicted of distributing drugs, not possession, distributing drugs. When did he decide to carry a gun? Because he was convicted of illegal possession of a weapon. On the day of the incident, why did he decide to sell drugs? When a police officer wanted to stop him, Why didn't he stop for the police officer? There are 12 million arrests by police officers, according to the FBI UCR, every single year. There are over 500,000 violent criminals that are arrested every single year. What are most of these people doing? They're surrendering when a police officer tries to arrest them.
Yeah.
This young man made the choice not to do it.
Yeah.
He made the choice to back into a police cruiser, to hit a civilian vehicle, to drive 87 miles an hour. And the ultimate decision he made when the officer was standing outside the car, telling him to get outside the car, instead of surrendering and getting out of the car peacefully, he reaches for a gun. Why are our young people making these decisions? If we can turn around what these young people are doing and help them make better life choices, we will have far less police shootings and far less crime in our society. And that's what we really should be focusing on. And the book addresses that issue.
Well, it's interesting. I want to show you what I think is one of the biggest problems in society these days, and it's that right there. It's our cell phones and it's our Facebook apps and our, you swipe on the iPhone. If you swipe to the left, you'll see just article after article after article brought to you by Apple. That's from CNN, Huffington Post, what have you. And those articles are all not about your narrative, but about the unarmed person who was shot by police officers. And so when you have a 7-second body cam clip that's replayed a million times on the mainstream media without any context whatsoever, you don't just have a judicial system that has issues, you have a court of public opinion that has already declared that that officer is guilty without having any facts and any information whatsoever. And I'm constantly hearing, well, police don't speak out about bad cops. Police don't speak out about situations where a police officer was in the wrong. And the reality of it is that they're allowing the investigation to happen first and foremost. And in the meantime, while that investigation is underway, you have a media that has already convicted that police officer. So I think one of the greatest tools that we have at our disposal and one of the most valuable ways that we have of communicating is also one of the biggest challenges that we have when it comes to overcoming some of these narratives. So I guess my question for you is, how do we overcome that?
Well, we overcome the narrative by telling the truth about the realities of what police officers are like. Is there really racism? Is there really pervasive excessive force? No one's questioning the fact that there's bias in law enforcement. There's bias everywhere in our society. Every human being in this world is biased. No one's challenging that. No one's challenging the fact that there's excessive force. I mean, every day there are police out there who are pushing someone unreasonably, maybe handcuffing unreasonably, maybe even punching them unreasonably. But police brutality cases are few and far between. And police racism also is few and far between. If you want to talk about police racism, one of the things that we have in this book is we talk about the number of racial profiling cases there are. Now, I did the legal update for the IACP attorneys for 23 years, and I had to research cases. The last 10 years that I did it, I was hard-pressed to find an appellate case where there was sustained racial profiling cases. Very, very, very difficult to find sustained cases of racial profiling. Lots of people think that they're being treated unfairly because of their race, ethnicity, etc. But the proof doesn't happen to be there. More significantly, the incident of greatest notoriety is the New York City stop and frisk decision that was rendered, how that was bias, if not racial profiling. And according to the ACLU from New York, they evaluated 4.4 million stops from 2002 to 2015. And with regard to those stops, and about 48% of them were also stops and frisks, they found that 87.8% of those people were innocent people. Now, the public may be outraged about that. But when you think about that, 12.2% were in violation of the law. That's incredibly successful. Imagine me stopping you, questioning you, maybe even patting you down and finding a gun or drugs so that you're wanted. If I could do that for 1 out of every 10 people, that's, for a 5-minute stop, that's a very successful program. Let's take TSA. How many people did TSA stop? Okay. And what kind of an inconvenience is that? Opening your suitcase, taking your belt, your shoes off, waiting in line. It's a lot more than 5 or 10 minutes.
Handing over your bottle breacher, frag grenade.
You know what can happen there. According to the New York ACLU, 1.5% of the stops resulted in finding illegal weapons. That's 1,500 for every 100,000 people. TASA, from their statistical analysis, For every 100,000 people that they stop and search, they find only 3 guns. And more often than not, they're innocent people who just improperly pack their luggage.
Sure.
Which you can understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can get that.
Okay. So, I mean, for public safety, stop and frisks are really a good thing, but they were portrayed in the public as being, oh my God, look at all those innocent people that are being annoyed, inconvenienced. Now, if you ask me to go into a voting booth, and vote on this particular issue, you're going to be stopped 10 times this year and 10 times for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to inconvenience you. You're going to be annoyed. You may even be humiliated. And it's going to take 10 minutes out of your life every time you're stopped. And you might even be patted down.
Yeah.
But you're going to save the life of an innocent father, mother, or child. Of those guns that were taken off the city streets of New York, how many might have been used to kill an innocent person, to commit a robbery? How many people were stopped and arrested for drugs, that those drugs may have been used to kill people? How many lives were saved during that program? It's all a matter of perspective and perception and bringing it forth. And we can bring it forth by using their statistical analysis.
I love it. I love it. I mean, it's such a great way of putting it. And it's scary because sometimes things like this get so politicized that we can't think of the reality of it, which is that, you just pointed out how many innocent children were saved by this, how many fathers and mothers were saved by this policy. More frighteningly, how many lives are going to be lost by stopping this?
Yeah, that is the simple reality, that this attack on police officers and Black Lives movement is going to lead to greater crimes and more innocent people that are going to be harmed. You will be hard pressed to find an innocent person with his hands up in the air in surrender, as they claim, who is shot by a police officer. These things simply do not happen. Given the stories that come out from the Washington Post and the Guardian publication, if you really dig down into these stories, there may be about 5 people, innocent people, who are killed by police shootings every year. There are some bystander shootings. For instance, a woman driving a car and her boyfriend is shooting out of the car, and the police officers shoot back and they kill her. Okay, and there may be even obviously more innocent people that are tragically and innocently shot by police officers.
Well, on
terrible.
paper, that's innocent, right? On paper, she was an innocent bystander.
Well, yes, but there are. I mean, for instance, there's a case where a guy was pointing his gun at the police officers who told him to drop it. He didn't drop it. They shot him. The bullet went through his arm and hit his daughter, who was standing in the back.
No.
Now, she was truly innocent.
Right.
And there was this young boy who was in a car, and his father did something, and it led to a shooting. So there are innocent people that are killed,
Sure.
and that's tragic. But if you put it in the context of people who have professions that make life and death decisions, in 2016, Johns Hopkins University, which I hope is a credible source, they estimate that in 2016, there were approximately 251,000 people who died because of medical malpractice.
Wow.
To put that in the context, police officers make life and death decisions. Sometimes they're wrong. But for every innocent person that's shot by a police officer, there are approximately 50,000 people that die, innocent people, because of medical malpractice. How really bad are police officers? And do we see people out there marching? What do we want? Dead doctors? When do we want it? Now?
Well, it's interesting because one of the stats that I had sent over to Fox was that there are, if you look at the total number of police-involved shootings, justified, not justified, the total number from 2015, it doesn't even equal 10% of the total number of people who died from heart-related diseases.
Perfect.
So, I mean, I sort of think that means that we need to remove ice cream stands and Big Macs from society, because think about all the lives that we could, I mean, when you really think about the numbers, it's crazy. But this is a shameless plug time.
Yeah,
How can people?
But can I say one more thing that I think is most important? Part of the narrative is blacks are twice as likely to be shot as whites in our society, and that's a logical conclusion. 12.2% of our national population is black, and approximately 25% of people that are shot are black. If you look at the Washington Post stories, their summaries of the factual situations and the violent criminals, as I said before, people who are attacking others, people who are, causing a risk of serious harm or death to others, that's what almost all of these cases are all about. We're talking about dangerous criminals. When you do an analysis and you're comparing people of races and ethnicities, you have to look at them in similarly situated circumstances. For example, for racial profiling, if you looked at your town and you said, well, 4.4% of the motor vehicle stops were Asians, but only 2% of our population were Asians, it'd say, oh my God, you're biased against Asians. But here's the question that you'd have to ask to see if that's a fair analysis. True or false? The only people who drive in your town are Asians.
Right.
It's not true. You don't compare it with the general population.
Right.
Police officers aren't out there on the streets shooting people walking down the street, going into classrooms, going into supermarkets, and just shooting innocent people.
Right.
Who do you have to compare it with? The people who are really being shot, the dangerous criminals who are being shot. And this is a tragic, fact that we have to face. But it's kind of the elephant in the room about what everything's going on, and nobody's talking about this. If you look at the FBI uniform crime reports, and these crime reports from 2014 to 2016, and average them out, 37.2% of the violent crimes, people that are arrested for these crimes, are black. Murders and non-negligent manslaughter, 51.7%.
Wow.
Robberies, 55.5% of our robberies, black people. 32.8% of aggravated assaults. I hate saying this because I don't think we should be mixing race and ethnicity with police shootings.
Right.
When a police officer shoots someone, they don't care what the color of the hand is holding the gun or the knife or beating them. They don't care.
About
it doesn't
subduing a
matter
threat.
to them. It pains me to talk about race and police use of force at the same time. It's not valid. I would like to say what these statistics show us is that we have to do more to help our young people not to become involved in violent crimes, not to become in any crimes at all, to be productive citizens. Because if we can knock this down so that only 10% of our young black men are committing these crimes, the statistics on police shootings will drop precipitously.
I couldn't agree more. We have to look at the socioeconomic divides that have allowed things to get to this point where police officers have to subdue a threat. The problem, from my perspective, isn't the police officers, it's the threat, regardless of what that threat looks like, whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian, it doesn't matter. A threat is a threat. And so if we can address the root of the socioeconomic divide before that and what leads people to get to this point, I think we'll be making strides in the right direction.
Exactly right. Now you can do your shameless plug.
Oh, this is for you. Well, this is your shameless plug. Where can people buy the book?
Well, they can get it on Amazon. They can get it directly from the publisher. And the publisher is Loose Leaf Law Publications, which is www.looseleaflaw.com. They're in New York. Or they could actually go on our website and ask me for it.
Awesome.
The Spector Criminal Justice Training Network, we certify approximately 1,000 police officers a year in training.
Awesome.
And you can get on our website. If it's easier, you can just pump in SCJTN, okay?
Awesome.
And we can find out. And it can also be obtained at Barnes and Noble. I think they have not audio books. Well, how else do they do that? Electronic books. Electronic format.
People actually still go to stores and buy books.
Well,
I get everything on Amazon. I'm not gonna lie. That's a whole other conversation.
Okay.
Hey, I'm really glad that we finally got to meet. Everyone's been telling me forever, you gotta have him on the show.
I appreciate that.
Guys, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for taking the 2 seconds it's gonna take you to hit the share button. Thanks for getting these stories out there, and excellent. God bless America.